Hello, young illustrators. My name is Robert Young, and I'm an illustrator, designer, animator, printmaker, and fine artist, and professor of illustration. And today, I'm going to talk about portfolios. So, no matter what area of visual arts you're in, you can't really show people your work without a portfolio. So it's really important that you have one, that you know what people expect to see in a portfolio, and specifically, I'm going to talk about online web-based portfolios. Obviously, right now, during a pandemic, there's not a lot of people accepting in-person portfolio visits, and for a lot of illustrators and designers, this has really turned into a web-based thing anyway, for years now. So long gone are the days where you lug your giant portfolio of oil paintings to an actual office and try to convince somebody to let you see an editor, art director, or somebody. So for the most part, this is done online. That's where either people are going to go to your website and see the work that you're putting out there, or you're going to make like a mini portfolio to email to a potential client or collaborator or somebody you'd like to work with. So let's talk about the components of a web-based portfolio. There's two things that you need, and they are, one, a domain name. So that's the URL. That's the thing that you type into the address bar so that people can find your website. And the second thing is a web host or hosting service of some kind, and that's where all of the code that makes up your website is going to live, links to images, files, all of that stuff. So really, the easiest and most popular options anymore are to use a website design service that's kind of all encompassing. So Squarespace, Wix, Weebly are all really popular, just general website platforms where you can buy and register a domain name through a lot of them, and they're going to host all of your files, and they're going to offer design tools so that you can actually make your portfolio look nice. Squarespace, Wix, and Weebly specifically work really well for visual artists. So if you're an illustrator, designer, fine artist, photographer, anything like that with static images, those are really good options. There are also websites like ArtStation, like Behance, like DeviantArt, tons of others that some of them have the ability to customize your URL a little bit, so you have a little bit nicer presentation. They also have some kind of stuff that we covered in the social media lecture that I posted previously. So our ArtStation is really popular with visual development folks, people that are lead animators or 3D modelers. Weebly and Wix both have free or cheaper options, and then Squarespace is probably the most professional looking out of the box. It does cost, I think the last time I checked, it was a little over $100 a year. They usually have coupons. They usually have promotional terms for students, so you can take advantage of those a little bit, but pretty much anything, even if you go the route that's the most difficult but allows you the most control over your website, which is just coding the entire thing yourself, you still have to pay for the domain name, and you still have to pay for hosting space, and then you have to do a lot more work. So if you don't know how to do that work, then you'd have to hire somebody to do the coding and the web design for you, or you'd have to take the time and maybe even pay money to, go through some classes or something online to learn how to do the coding. So, coding is definitely an option. It's going to give you the ability to have a website that doesn't look like other people's websites. Or if you are, if you're making 3D stuff or even 2D stuff or animations that have interactive elements to them, some programming in there, kind of more into game design type situation, then coding is going to give you the ability to do more unique stuff with your website. But it's absolutely not necessary. I'd say the vast majority of people who are working in visual arts, something like Squarespace is going to work fine for them. There are some things that people will say about, you have to have a URL that is just your name. So like mine is robertyoungillustration.com. And I think that's pretty good advice. It does get into some problems sometimes. Like my name, Robert Young, is a very common name. So it's really hard for me to have kind of any straightforward social media account or website or, even just account username for online services, Amazon and stuff. So, all of my emails have a bunch of numbers in them or periods or underscores. So if you're somebody who has a really common name, then, you might not be able to have a really straightforward URL. You might have to get a little inventive with it. Another thing that you can do is, you can give yourself a name, like you can give yourself a studio name. So that's an option as well if you do have a really common name. I think that for the most part, your portfolio is going to do the speaking for you. If you have a good portfolio, people looking at it are not necessarily going to, see all this great work and then say like, oh, well, their URL is wix.robertyoung/something.com. As long as they can find you, as long as you're proving that you're doing good work, that's the most important thing. The rest of it's kind of just icing on the cake. So I'm going to show you just how my website is laid out and kind of go through some basic things that are going to be on, basically every visual artist portfolio online. So here's the main page. When you go to robertyoungillustration.com, it takes you directly to images of my work. And these are current images of my work. There's not a splash page or a landing page or any kind of animation or anything that people have to click through. So it's just immediately, the thing that is being highlighted by having a web portfolio is right up there front and center. This is just a template from Squarespace. I mean, I didn't really do any work to set this up. They have tons of different gallery templates. They all look pretty good, contemporary, modern design. It takes care of the job of making sure that your website looks good and adapts to different screen sizes or mobile platforms. That's really important too. If you're coding your own website, you need to make sure that you're considering that. One thing that you can do is have different pages for different things. So if you see over on the left, there's a tab that says comics. So if you click on that, then all of my comics are kind of in one place. That way, the main portfolio, the thing that I'm seeking the most of, doesn't have other stuff in there. Or also, if you have a really big project, really big sequential project or character design project or something, thesis work or whatever, and you can see on the left there, there's a tab that says Scumlords, which was a character design project that I've been doing for years now, and there's like 90 different characters in there. So rather than that cluttering up the main portfolio, they can live in a separate tab. Another thing that a lot of the web design services have and hosting services have, which is really, really nice, is built-in e-commerce stuff. So Squarespace, I think all of them have the ability to very easily add, I think this one uses Stripe, which is a sort of point of sale system for online selling, and you can manage your inventory and upload stuff. So if you have prints, like I have comics and prints, and if I ever wanted to add anything else there, I could. If I wanted to do t-shirts, or if I wanted to do sculptures, or even one-off original drawings, I could put them on there. When someone buys something through my website, it just sends me an email. It manages it takes one out of inventory. It manages the payment. The payment gets moved over into my actual checking account. It's really, really, really easy. You can also do this, you could sell things through Etsy. You could sell things through eBay, I guess, or other services. But having it just all nice and in line is really useful. So another thing that you absolutely must have, and if you don't have it, it kind of defeats the whole purpose, is a really clear place for people to contact you through your email or whatever. I've heard people kind of debate about whether or not it should just be a link to your email, or if it should be like a submission form or what. I don't think it really matters that much. If someone wants to contact you, they're going to contact you. But if they want to contact you and they can't find your email address on your page anywhere, or they can't, they have to hunt too long to find it, they might give up. It kind of leaves a bad impression, and obviously then you're not getting emails from people who would maybe hire you. So make sure that's there. Have a little biography, a picture of yourself. Doesn't even have to be a real picture. It could be a drawing, self-portrait that you do, whatever to represent yourself. This is also an area where you can put links to your social media. So you see, I've got a little link there for Twitter and Instagram. I've also got a list of my clients. So once you start collecting clients, you do jobs for other people, putting that somewhere kind of just shows a potential client or collaborator that, you've done this a couple of times. It doesn't have to be every client you've ever had. And as you progress, if you've got some stuff in there that is like, is your cousin's pizza restaurant that you did a logo for, or your sister's boyfriend's brother's band, as you start getting, bigger clients that are, have a more recognizable name, I guess, or more prestige, you can, cycle some of the older ones out if you want. It doesn't need to be every single person you've ever worked for. I don't have every single person I've ever worked for. It's just kind of a highlight. This is also an area where you can list anything else. So, just because you're an illustrator, or just because you're an animator or a designer, doesn't mean that you can't make fine art work, or that you can't put your work in a gallery. I mean, really, that's the big difference between a lot of illustration design and fine art work, is just that context of it being on a gallery wall. So, and there's, more and more galleries that are really friendly to people who make kind of more commercial work. There's also more people making commercial work that looks more like fine art work. So don't be afraid of having gallery shows, and if you do them, put them up here, just like with your clients, or if anybody interviews you or writes a review of your work anywhere, you can add that as well. So that's the stuff, you need to have all of that somewhere, minus the store. If you don't have stuff to sell, don't have a store, but pictures of your work, contact information. That needs to be the number one priority of any portfolio, whether or not it's your website, or if it is in person. So I'm going to go through a little bit of advice, and a lot of people will give different advice for portfolios, so seek that out. This is based on my experiences, things that I've seen work and not work, and talking to other people and reading about how other people put their portfolios together. These are my opinions. So the first thing is that you're promoting yourself. That's what your portfolio is. And so this is the most important tool. if you have really good work and a really bad portfolio, or a really hard to navigate portfolio, or no portfolio, then you can't really expect to get very many jobs as an illustrator, designer, animator. How could you? Like, if people can't see your work, or if they can't figure out how to contact you, this is the most important thing. So I've seen people with amazing work, these beautiful drawings, beautiful fine art pieces, and they can't land a gallery show, or they can't get the clients that they want because they don't have a website, or their website isn't up to date, or it's really hard to navigate, or whatever. So that's a really easy way for all of that work that you do on your images to be kind of for nothing. So the second piece of advice is to keep it up to date. This isn't really like a deal breaker. This is more best practice. Really, hopefully you get really busy, you get tons of work, and maybe you only end up updating your portfolio once a year or something. That's great. If you're still getting work, then it's doing its job. Best practice is probably to update it a few times a year. You don't want to update it every day or every month. But you should be constantly making new work throughout the year, and you should be constantly improving as an illustrator, kind of for your whole life, your whole career as an artist. So when you get new work and it's kind of surpassed your old work, or you take stuff in a different direction stylistically, your artistic voice changes, add some new stuff to your website, and take some of the old stuff down. Another really important piece of advice is to research other artists in your field and take note of what you see artists working in that field doing with their portfolios. So there's not a lot of difference between the stuff that a visual development artist for characters for a sci-fi fantasy game that's realistic looking. There's not a lot of stuff that they have to do that a person doing realistic looking fantasy genre book covers for publishing companies doesn't also have to know how to do. Like, you both are going to need to be able to render different textures over forms. But when you look at like a texture artist portfolio for VizDev, you might see stuff where those texture or effects or whatever examples that they have in their portfolio are rendered over cubes or spheres. That's not something you're really going to see in somebody who's doing sci-fi fantasy book covers, even if the rendering kind of stylistic stuff is pretty similar. So pay attention to that. What can you expect to see on people that on people's portfolios that do the kind of things that you want to do? Make sure that your portfolio doesn't miss stuff that art directors would be looking for. Another thing that's really important, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit, is giving context to images. So it's really easy if you've made an illustration for an editorial, for instance, and now it's just that image on your website. Out of context, a lot of times the illustrations, they may not make sense anymore. They may be, it may seem kind of like a non sequitur or just some image, or really, really specific in a weird way. So, have a little information in there. If it's like, oh, this was for an article for the New York Times about working from home, great, have that in there. Also, if you did it for a client, have that in there. That way, this is actually an example of client work that I did for somebody else, and kind of shows what you can do. Helps reinforce the idea that you're reliable. Also, if it was self-initiated, you can put that. Just make sure that you have some sort of context. It can be a lot different looking at a fine artist portfolio than a commercial artist portfolio if the context is missing. Things get confusing. So another thing is remove clutter. I'm not a big fan of splash pages or any sort of website gimmicks, auto playing video or auto playing audio when you visit people's websites. I think anything that could potentially distract from the work is going to be a distraction from the work. So for me, I like to make sure that none of that stuff is there. Obviously, there are people who use that and find success with that, but I'm a big fan of removing the clutter. This also could just be old or irrelevant work. So if you've got, especially starting out in your career, when you have like your first portfolio, you might have a bunch of student work on there. If you went to art school, stuff that you made like your senior thesis or something, that makes sense. It's probably like the best work that you've done at the time. There's kind of a quality that ends up happening with student work where it looks like student work. Like you can tell when it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's a really common brief for an assignment for like junior illustration or senior graphic design. So when you can get rid of those things, or build them into a bigger project, take that project forward past what you did in school so that it kind of doesn't look like schoolwork. And you don't need to tell people that you're a student. If you're sending your portfolio to people as a student, there's no reason to put that in there. As soon as you start promoting yourself professionally, as far as I'm concerned, you're a professional artist. So you don't want to like prime your audience by telling them, oh, I'm just a student, or I just graduated or something. Like, you don't need to put that in there. There is a lot of debate over how many pieces of work should be in a portfolio. I would say in a physical portfolio that you're taking to somebody, you really don't want any more than like maybe 12 or 15 or like 20 at the absolute most. And that really depends on what kind of work it is. Because if they're really large paintings, then 20 can be overwhelming. On a website, you don't have the same concerns. So obviously, if you have every piece of work that you've ever made on your website, that can be really overwhelming. It's also maybe unlikely for a lot of people that all of that work's going to kind of match in quality and stylistic direction and all of that stuff. So, you don't want too many pieces, and you don't want like 4 pieces. The big thing is that all of the work should be up to the same level of quality. So, if you've got 20, 30, 40 pieces that are all up to the same level of quality, great. If you've only got 8 pieces that are up to the same level of quality, that's fine. Just have the 8 pieces and work on, adding more pieces, giving yourself assignments, or, taking them from what people do in the field, in your industry that you're interested in. That could be redesigning some characters or doing some assets for a game that you like, or taking an editorial article and doing some illustrations for it. And kind of going back to that context idea, you can add that in there. Like, this was a self-directed kind of personal project based on articles from the New York Times, blah blah blah. That's totally fine. Portfolios, anything that you have in your portfolio, that's the kind of work that people are going to hire you for. So if you have stuff in there that you're like padding your portfolio out with, that's work that you don't really want to do, chances are people are going to see that. They're going to try to hire you for that. You're going to end up with more pieces that look like that are going to get you more work that you don't want to do in the first place. So, if you ever kind of go through and decide to change your whole style, change your whole industry or something like that, get those old pieces out, even if it means that, you have to make new self-directed work or whatever. Even one piece that is lower than the other pieces in quality, or, it's just really, really old and you can kind of tell that it doesn't quite fit in, those things can stick out. I don't think that it's like an absolute deal breaker. Obviously, people are going to assume, any art director that you're going to want to work with is going to understand that, you're a human being, and that every single piece that you do is probably not 5,000% the best ever in the world. I've found that people that don't understand things like that, sometimes they can have really aggressive personalities, and maybe it's a blessing in disguise that they don't like the one piece that's only at like 95%. But if you have something that really, really sticks out, like you have a really bad piece or a really old piece, or and sometimes it's going to be hard to tell on our own work because we form kind of personal attachments to pieces, or the subject matter was something that's really close to us. So that stuff can help by having somebody outside critique your portfolio, a friend that you trust to give you good critique, or a peer in the industry or something. Totally fine. Sometimes we can't see those things ourselves. Another really common piece of advice that you'll hear is that everything needs to be one style, like one cohesive style. And style is a kind of sticky subject. It's really a different topic than this. But if you look at professional illustrators' websites and designers and stuff, especially people in VizDev, if they're allowed to post anything, and we can kind of get to that later, they may have worked for different companies that have a different house style, and so they're going to have stuff that's in a different stylistic voice. They're going to have, if they've worked in games and also 2D animation, characters look a lot different. It's really hard to animate concept art for characters or translate that into real animation if they don't have kind of a solid outline or like good boundaries on them. So it's okay to have a couple of styles. It's the more different stuff that you have on there, the harder it's going to get to feel like someone that's hiring you can reasonably expect what they're seeing. If it's just all over the place, like it's totally random, people may not want to take a chance on that. So if you have everything in one style, that's fine. If it's a couple of styles, that's fine. If you look at somebody like Jillian Tamaki, she does a lot of different kinds of work. There are things that you can tell it's her work across different just aesthetic choices, and I think that's really more of what style is. But it does look different, and it addresses different markets, and it's all on her website. She also has a ton of pieces, so that's a really good website to look at, actually. The personal URL thing is another piece of advice. Again, I don't know that it's necessarily a deal breaker. I don't know that it's necessarily a deal breaker if your only portfolio is on Instagram or Behance or something. I mean, people do get hired that way. So I think it's probably better. There's still going to be people that if you don't have your own website, maybe they feel like you're not really at the pro level. Like, maybe it's more of a hobbyist situation, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But especially in something like publishing or editorial or VizDev, where if somebody kind of flakes out on you as an illustrator or designer, that's really, really bad for them. Anything that can kind of calm their nerves a little bit, make them really reassured that you're going to be able to do work for them and get stuff in on time and be really professional. So I think that a personal URL helps with that, or not only having an Instagram page, but it's definitely not a deal breaker. All of your work, if you're working traditionally, you need to figure out and develop a process to photograph and document your work. So if that piece is amazing in person, but you kind of just took like a bad iPhone picture and threw it up on your website, that doesn't really reflect well. It doesn't really show the work in its best capacity. So make sure that you're putting that craft into how you're documenting your work as well. This could also be if you're making something like a wraparound book cover, if you have something like that in your portfolio, it's one thing to see that as a flat image, and it's another thing to wrap that around a book and, photograph it, take a, nice documentation of that thing in 3 dimensions. It kind of shows that you understand how that works practically in publishing, that you can take into consideration design elements that need to be on a 3-dimensional form. So I always think that looks really good. Also, if you do have book covers and, let's say you're not interested in doing hand lettering, but you did a book cover that had some hand lettering on it, don't post the picture with the hand lettering. Make sure you have a file that doesn't have the hand lettering or doesn't have type design or something, if those aren't your strong suits. That way they're not in there, they're not distracting. If that's not up to the same quality level as your drawing or illustration work, then it's you're not going to be kind of punished for that. So for animation demo reels, a lot of this stuff is exactly the same. The difference is that it's animated instead of static. So you still need to have your contact info. You still need to make sure that it's your best work. You still want to make sure that you're showing off everything that you can do and that it's stuff that you're actually actively seeking to do for other people. The only thing that's kind of really different is that you still have a website, but you're probably also going to put that up on YouTube, on Vimeo, maybe ArtStation, maybe other, definitely social media. Now that Instagram has a little bit of a more longer format video function in Reels, that could be something I could see putting a demo reel on as an animator. If you're doing 3D work, whether it's animated or static, all these same things apply. So, and it would be the same thing that I would tell people if they were fine artists or ceramicists or performance artists or something. Another thing that is different with an animation reel is that you have the ability to control what order pieces are seen in. So that can be important. If you've got 2 pieces that are super similar to each other, maybe you don't put them back to back. Try out, kind of different orders or something. It's kind of like putting a mixtape together or something. And the editing of those clips together, and also other elements that you use, the way that you've included your contact information, is that animated? Is it, does it look like a sort of bad or cheesy PowerPoint slide wipe or something, like ghosts in from off camera? If you can do a better job and in the presentation of that work, then do so. This is gonna add more production value. Your work's gonna look even better. So now I'm going to show you just a couple of websites of other illustrators. You're going to see a lot of the same things that were on my website. And yeah, the video is loading. That's good. So yeah, this is Haley Powers, an illustrator and designer, and she does a little bit of animation. She also does some ceramics. Really cool stuff, but you can see the same thing is on most portfolio websites. If there's a big project like this, it's on a different page. The main page is, stuff that they are wanting people to see first. There's no splash page or anything. The personal information is kind of laid out in a different way. Great. So here's another one. This is Richard A. Chance. Same stuff. Work on the front page, links to other places. This was actually a link to, an external web store. So you can still totally do that. You're definitely still going to want to have a bio. Some people have a really long bio. Some people have a really short bio. It should feel natural. It should feel like, it makes sense for you. If you're someone who's doing this like really lowbrow, like gross out, sort of Mad Balls illustration or something, and then you've got this really stuffy academic sounding artist statement, that's kind of weird. Like your artist statement can and should fit your personality, or your bio should fit your personality. If you're kind of weird and you're making weird work, have a weird artist statement. It's totally fine. So here's a portfolio for illustrator and animator Shira Wang. So on the main page, you've got videos. She's done some work for Adult Swim that you can see there, but she also does static illustration work. She's got a bunch of different tabs. Even the different sections have different sections. So if you want to lay your website out that way, that's fine if it makes sense. And then same thing, information about the artist, how to get into contact with them, who they've worked for, why you should hire them. You're selling yourself. So, and that's a skill that you want to develop. It's probably the hardest part of being an illustrator. But putting a portfolio together is not just having some images up somewhere. So here's a design and animation studio called Golden Wolf that have done a lot of cool stuff for various different brands and sports teams and leagues, fashion companies, Cartoon Network and Adult Swim. So they have just a ton of stuff. They're a really good website to look at. This doesn't look like it was, a Squarespace preset template portfolio thing. So they probably had somebody design this for them. If they didn't do it themselves, they may very well have done it themselves. And then here is a portfolio on ArtStation for Soa Lee, who is a character artist for Naughty Dog Studios. So you can see, even if it's three-dimensional renderings and characters, it basically works the same way. And this is a person who, their page on ArtStation is artstation.com/Soa-Lee. So, they're getting work. Clearly having, a super personalized URL isn't a deal breaker or anything. But yeah, so that's really all I have on portfolios. They're pretty simple. You kind of have to keep at it. It's a living document. You're going to keep adding to it. You're going to keep getting better as an artist, or you're going to change, and so your portfolio is going to need to change. If you're doing stuff where you're under a lot of NDA agreements or something, a lot of people in VizDev, they can't really show their work. So, at that point, maybe you don't need a portfolio. But for anybody else, you're going to have something that you can show people your work with. It's really, really good looking and easy to navigate and easy to find. And that's your portfolio. So thanks for watching this. If people have any questions or anything, you can always feel free to email me. My email is robertyoungillustration@gmail.com, or you can leave comments on here. But thanks for watching, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.